All right, first off, I'd just like to start by saying thank you very much for your time. This is a great experience for myself and Sam. Just want to get right into the questions. I was wondering, when did you go into the military?
I went in the military March 20th, 1944.
Okay. How did you go about joining the military? Did you enlist, or were you drafted, or?
I tried to join for a whole year, tried to volunteer when I was 17 years old, and they wouldn't take me. When I was 18, I had to sign up for the draft. We had a draft in those days, and my number come up. I had to report to the draft board, and they had I volunteered for the next draft. I was a voluntary inductee. I didn't wait for my turn. I went just as soon as I was 18. I was 18 on January 25th of 44. I volunteered, and they called me up in the next draft, and I was in the Navy, in the Sampson Naval Base, March 20th. That's when I was sworn in, of 44.
All
I was
right.
18 years old.
When you entered the military, can you tell me a little bit about what your life was like? Were you in school, or were you working? The situation.
Well, when you first go into the military, they bring you into what they call a boot camp. That's the beginning, the basics. And in there, you learn how to follow orders, how to march, how to use your gear. Like I was in the Navy, so most of all our gear was all folded stuff. You know, we had a sea bag. Should have brought the sea bag in. I got out. Okay. It's just like a big duffel bag, tall, and everything folded up. And they show you the military courtesy. They show you movies of training projects, medical problems that you may run into. Because you more or less, you walk into the military, you left your home, you left your mother, your father, your brothers, all your friends. You're in a strange place. And in those days, we didn't have information available to us like today. You can go onto the computer, www.com, and pick up anything you want. We didn't have nothing but the newspaper and a radio, if you had a radio. Most people didn't have radios in those days. You people are the boomer babies, but we were the Depression babies. The Depression just hit us in 29, and we were just coming out of the Depression. So it's more or less basics, is showing you the military, what the military expected you of you. You know, like they teach you marching, and they kept you all training. That's what it was, the basic training. That's what boot camp was. That's the start of it. And then before you got out of boot camp, they gave you tests, certain tests, trying to figure out what you were qualified for. Well, I qualified for radio, and I qualified for gunnery. So that was the two high marks that they put me in. When I left boot camp, that's what I was heading for, towards a gunnery school.
When you finished the boot camp and the training, where were you sent to? Where were you stationed?
Well, right after boot camp, the first thing they do is they give you a leave to go home. You know, you get. I think we had 10 days, something like that. We were in Sampson, New York, up here, upstate New York, and when I went back, I had orders to report to Chicago, Illinois' Navy Pier. It's a training school, and we were biding our time there, waiting for the gunnery school and the radio school to graduate. There was a class ahead of us, and meanwhile, while we were there, we were working in odd jobs, doing in the kitchen working, and the gallery, and just passing time until the classes graduated. But I didn't get to go to school. What happened, the big push was on in Europe, in the Bulge. So what they did, they transferred us, my crew that I was with, they sent us to an ammunition depot down in Illinois, Crane, Indiana. Not Illinois, Crane, Indiana, which is right close to Bloomington, Indiana, where the Indiana University's at. And we got into the ammunition depots. We were loading boxes boxcars and trucks with ammunition, shells, Navy shells, all kinds of ammunition, small arms, large shells, powder. Everything. It was a big ammunition depot. It was 110 square miles. And there was no roads to the ammunition magazines. You had to drive to a certain point and then walk down to along the railroad tracks to get to the ammunition depot. It was all underground. The stuff was all based underground.
All right.
To the hills there.
You mentioned obviously the ammunition depot. Where did you say that was?
Crane, Indiana. That's located maybe about 10 miles. I don't know exactly how it was east or west of. It's near Bloomington, Indiana was our town where we went for when we had leave. You know, like they give us like every third weekend we got a 48-hour pass. You know, and that's where we used to go most of the guys. And that's right near Bloomington, Indiana University.
Okay.
In fact, that's where I got married.
While you were at the depot, could you tell me, I was wondering like what your rank was and any specific duties you had, responsibilities?
Well, when you get out of boot camp, you're automatically a seaman, second class, and you first start out as an able-bodied seaman, but then when you graduate out of boots, you get second class. And I got while I was there at Crane, I was there about I think it was around 15 months. I got up to the rank of seaman first class, which is just one step above. After seaman first class, then you go into your petty officers. And I did attain that there rank. You had to take a test, and that's where I was, a seaman first class.
Okay, I was wondering, while all this was going on, while you decided you wanted to join the military and you were going through training, do you remember like what kind of things were going through your head, what your thoughts were on the war and your specific role in it?
Well, I was mad. I mean, the only news we used to get was, like I said before, was on the radio and on in the papers. And the Rome Sentinel had a teletype system. They used to, all the news they got, they'd flash it out, they'd post it on the front windows. Not where it is now, but in the old place, down on North James Street. And I was mad, you know, here's an enemy comes and bombs our people, and sneak attack, and I wanted to get even. I wanted to get into the service, and you know, I just wanted to do my part. I wanted to get in there as quick as I could. That's why I quit school. I tried to get into the service, and I didn't make it, but I did go to work at a military plant where they made shells and smoke bombs, which I later started handling in the ammunition, the same stuff I was made. Now I'm handling it in there, loaded though this time with powder. That's why I wanted to get in there. All my friends were in there. I was the youngest one of the gang, of our group, and I'm sad to say that I'm the only one left now. They're all passed on, and they all were in the Navy. That's why I wanted to get into the Navy. But it was, you know, it wasn't like today where something happens out in Colorado, and an hour later you got it on TV and you can see it all. In our days, we just got what was in the newspaper. And then they start making war movies. You know, John Wayne and Ronald Reagan and all those movie actors, and I think they made about 60, 70 war movies. And now here you are watching what they're portraying, what's going on over there. And you're taking that as gospel because here it is, it's in the movies. And you want to be one of those guys in there, you know, especially when the enemy, what they did to our people over there. And that was true what they did. They were brutal. They were animals.
Okay, are there any people that stick out in your mind as significant to your life while you were in the service or after?
Well, my captain that I had at the ammunition depot, he stands out because he stopped me from volunteering to go into the active duty. he talked to me like my father would, you know, and like I said, I was only 18 years old, and I wanted to get into war. I wanted to get on that, shoot at the enemy. I wanted to get even. And he kept telling me, you don't know what you're talking about. He tried to explain to me the hardships of war, which I never really went through. The only hardships I had was I worked 14, 16 hours a day when we were loading. But still, I went to dry bed, and I didn't have anybody shooting at me at night. Although we were in a dangerous position, because we were where live ammunition was, where we were handling it, I'd go once a month. You could go to see the captain, and he was a man that came up from the ranks. He worked himself up, and he talked to me. He's telling me, Louis, he said, you don't know what you're talking about. He says, you stay right here. We need you here. You're doing your part. We need this ammunition. The boys need this ammunition over there. You're doing your part, and don't worry about going to active duty. And later on in life, especially now with this new History Channel we got, and I see what war was like, he did me a big favor. Probably saved my life, I don't know. But he really sticks out in my mind.
Have you kept in touch with any of the people you knew?
We got separate. Every time we got transferred, they take 5 guys here, 5 guys there, and transfer them at a time, you know. And the fellows I went to boot camp, I don't know any one of them where they're at. I got their pictures from boot camp because I got the photo. I think you people got a copy of that.
Yeah.
But all the fellas that I went into service with, I've lost no contact at all.
You mentioned the working at the depot 14 to 16 hours a day. Would you mind maybe just running me through a normal day in the life while you're working down there?
Well, the first thing, you got up about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and you reported to the chow hall. Then you were on the front line, out in the front parade ground at 7 o'clock, and you got your assignments, which magazine you were going to be working at. And well, there was maybe about 8 of us in each crew. I turned out to be the truck driver for the crew, and my father taught me how to drive a car when I was 13 years old. And we used to go fishing in the back, up in the woods, up in the old Lake Delta there, and he taught me how to. So I really passed the test fast, and he made me a truck driver. And I used to drive the guys out to the dump, or the magazine we were working in. And we had a civilian assigned to us. And he was a checker, and he'd have to keep record of. The first thing we did when we got there, we parked, like I told you, off a certain area, and we had to walk the railroad track to get to the underground bunker. The civilian would unlock it. We had to make sure that we had no metal on us or anything, because when you opened that, it was all powder in there. And they had, in those dumps, they had like an ether vapor was in there to keep the moisture out of the powder, because the powder would deteriorate if it got any humidity in there. You open the door, 2 big steel doors, big deck on there, concrete apron where the trains used to pull up, where we loaded. And he would check the table. There was samples of the powder that was stored in there. He would take the number out of there, and we would assist him. You know, we'd check it and make sure that the powder there was samples in there, and make sure that there was no deterioration or anything. Because if there was deterioration, it became dangerous, so we wouldn't work in there. Then we start loading. Box car was there, opened up the door, had the big hand trucks. Sometimes we'd be loading smokeless powder in canisters, load them up and roll them out to the box car. Sometimes we'd be unloading box cars and putting them in the magazines. It all depends what you had. And sometimes we'd be working in different areas. We had shells, we had cannon shells for the naval guns, the 16-inch guns, and you need about 2 guys to pull those things on. And naturally, they weren't loaded, they were, just the shell. Right. And we had bag powder that the Navy used. We had all kinds of ammunition in there. And that's what we did all day long. When they moved the bulge was going on, the war in Europe, that's where we had all those long hours, because they needed the ammunition. We just, train after train went out of there.
Right. You mentioned a magazine a couple times in there. I don't know exactly what
Well,
that is.
A magazine is a room. It's shaped like that, looking at it.
Okay.
And it was a place where you stored your ammunition. It was all covered over with dirt, grass. You got up 1,000 feet up in the air and flying over it, you wouldn't see it unless you followed the railroad track. It was all 110 square miles of area down in the middle of Indiana. And the magazine is where you keep your ammunition. It's stored. And they call the same thing, if you're aboard ship, the magazine was where the ammunition was, or your guns, rifles and pistols, whatever area you had. We didn't just have powder there. We had gas there. We had the primers. Everything was, it was a pretty dangerous area there. We were lucky in our 18 months I was stationed there. I think it was 15 to 18 months, something like that. We never had an explosion, but we had guys that came in from Hastings, Nebraska, where they had a big explosion. They lost a lot of men. Because naturally, when something like that goes, it's just contagious. But we were lucky. We were pretty safe, and we had good petty officers and a good captain watching over us.
That was where you were stationed in training?
That's where I was stationed after my boot camp.
Okay.
And then when the war ended, you want me to go on with this?
Yeah, sure.
When the war ended in the Bulge, they closed down the base, and we got shipped out. We were going overseas. We went to California, Oakland, California, in an outgoing unit. That's where you stand by and wait for your orders to what ship you were going on or where you were going at. And we were going to the islands. Well, then they dropped the big boy, and the war was over. Now here we are stationed. Now what are they going to do with those guys? They didn't need any more ammunition because the war was over. So they shipped us from California, went up to Washington, and I was unloading ships now. And I still was a truck driver, and I had a pretty good detail, you know. My job was to drive the men down to the ships, get loaded up, and bring the stuff up on top of the hill. It was in Puget Sound, they call Bremerton, Washington, and there's a big Navy yard there. And I finished my tour of duty there. In fact, I got discharged out of Bremerton Navy Yard.
All right.
Do you know what Puget Sound looks like?
No.
Well, the state of Washington on the west coast, off the Pacific there, it's all inland waterways. And they had deep water bays back in there where the ships were protected. You know, the ships would come back in, and maybe you'd go in 15, 20 miles from the sea back into inland. And that's where we unloaded. The ships used to come in there and we'd unload them, and that was it. I was more or less an ammunition laborer all the time, just handling that there.
Were there any places or events, specific events that stick out in your mind that you remember? Anything just special? Well,
when I was in Chicago, we were stationed, when I got out of boot camp there, Chicago the people there were wonderful. I'm telling you, it was just like home. They had servicemen centers there, like most of the places called USOs. Well, in Chicago, they call them servicemen centers. They had this one big hotel over on off of Grant Park, where you could go in there and get your whatever they had on the bar there, hot dogs, whatever they had, soda, ice cream. They had free tickets to events. People would invite you to their houses. We were on the trolley one day. We just going there and, see, we could go there every night because Navy Pier's right there in Chicago. You were right, maybe 5 blocks away from Grants Park, which is a big amusement area there now. In fact, that's what Navy Pier is now, it's an amusement area. And they'd invite you to their house, to dinner. And one woman there even asked us to bring our clothes, you know. The Navy didn't have too many things to wash, you know. They had those pants and blouse, and that was it. But they do everything for you, and that stuck in my mind. They treat us just like we were their sons.
Have you ever been back to any of these places?
Oh yeah, when I retired from the police department, I bought a motorhome in '85, and I traveled back to Chicago. I went to Bloomington where I was married. What a change. It's a big college town. Indiana University's right there in Bloomington. So, like they say, it was like off, like Rome to Utica, you know. It was a big campus area. And I try to go to the old city hall where I got my marriage license, and it was still there, but it was a museum area now, you know. It was like an old town, a circle. You ever been over to, there's a little village over here off of Clinton. Looks just like a little circle area. They had their park in there, and they had their little gazebo there where they used to meet and have their music like that. It was a good old farm town. That's just what it was. And those people, they treated us wonderful. Every place we went was in those days, you know, the war was on. It was a world war. So anybody in uniform was, they thought about their friends, and when they seen you, they treated them just like if they was their son. No thanks.
Okay. You mentioned how well you were treated by the people during your service. I was wondering how your experiences with the war affected life after.
Well, I was married when I was in the service. When I come home out of service, we had a son, and when I first came back, they weren't. I worked at the Roll Manufacturing where we made ammunition stuff, you know, the war stuff. When we come back out of service, they had been retooling everything. Well, back in those days, there was a law that if you worked at a place and you got discharged from the service, they had to rehire you. So they had like unemployment we had for so many weeks, $20 or something like that. I collected that for three weeks, but I couldn't, you know, I got a wife and a child. I couldn't, although I was my mother and father helping us, but I had to go back to work, so I went back into the mill, and they treated us good, you know. Naturally, they weren't. Where were you? Well, where was it? It was the United States, you know. Well, what'd you do? And I was an ammunition handler. But everybody thought that you had to go overseas and get shot at. But like you reminded me just a while ago, that for every person that was up in the front lines, you have to have logistics behind that man to put him there. So there was a lot of people that didn't hit the front lines. Maybe you can call them lucky or whatever you want to call them, but there still had to be people to push that stuff. And then that made me feel a little bit better when you said that today. I says, you know, he's right. Where would they got that ammunition if I wasn't there? Oh, they got civilians to do it. What civilians? They hired everybody they could, and all the young people were in the service. And I was one of the young people that ended up as a laborer in the service. So that made me feel good when you reminded me of that. That was a long time ago, remember that? 54 years ago. So a lot of water's gone over the dam. But today, kids like you, let me say this. I got on my truck, I got a World War II plate. And I belong to the American Legion. But when I put that plate on, last fall, the first time in 54 years, some kid, a young person, married, had his wife and child in the car. I was at a grocery store. And when I come out, he was standing behind my truck, the Blazer I got. He says, you a World War II veteran? Yeah. He said, I want to thank you. His father, excuse me, his grandfather was in World War II, and his grandfather passed away. He just wanted to thank for being a head shot. Excuse me. I get emotional overnight. It took over 54 years for somebody to hit me like that. And that wasn't the only time. One other person said that to me when they seen that plate. So people haven't forgotten us.
It's good. They shouldn't.
Sorry.
Just fine. Do you have any other things, any other experiences or final thoughts that you wanna talk about? Anything else?
Oh, you asked me about what happened after coming out of the service?
Yeah.
I went back to work in this roll manufacturing for 15 years. And I had dropped out of school and didn't have a high school diploma. And we were sitting there reading one day, and the paper said that anybody over 18 years old could get a high school diploma. So we, three of us, we were looking at it, we read it. So we went and took this test, this GED test or whatever, and got my diploma, and my GED diploma. So my wife says, well, what are you going to do with that now? I says, well, I don't know. I says, but I had a job. I was working 15 years. I had seniority, so things had been picked up after that, you know. The Korean War started, so now war industry again, so that made a lot of work. Out comes the paper again, civil service test for police department. So, hey, I'm eligible, so I go down, sign up for the police department test. There was 8 jobs open, 23 of us took the test, only 3 of us passed. So now the next step was to pass your medical, I passed it. Then you had to do your agility test, I passed it. Now I get the offer to have the job. Now I'm thinking, I'm working in the mill. In those days I was making $4,500 a year. That was a lot of money back in 56, 55, 56. And the police department was paying, no, I was making $52,000, and the police department only started with $43,000, so I was going to lose money. So we talked it over, and my wife says, if you really want to go, she says, you go ahead. She says, I'll find a job. So she did. So I took the police department job, and there I go, I'm a rookie again now. I go in the police department. I was 30, I was on November 1st of 57. I was going to be 31 in January 25th. Now they had a limit there, 29 years of age. But you could take military time deducted off your age to make you eligible. So the 2 years I had in the service, I was eligible. So I went on the police department. And I was on there 28 years. I went from walking the beat, riding motorcycle, went from sergeant, lieutenant, and I ended up as a captain in 28 years. I retired in November 1st of 1985. That's when I got the motorhome. And we went back to every state in the Union I went to in 10 years traveling time. And I know my friends have gone to Italy and who's gone to Ireland, but none of them has seen the United States like I have. and this is my country. And I've seen every state, and it's beautiful.
Now, I was just wondering, are your views of the war the same now as they were when you were in the war, when you were in the service? Have they changed over time?
What I thought about World War II?
Yeah.
I'm madder now than I was then,
Really?
because now I know more. That History Channel that we watch, the things that happened, I didn't even know about. And the beating our men took, and the things that people went through, like these secret missions and this, that World War II, I've got statistics, every country in the world was fighting. I mean, there wasn't a country, I think the only country that was not fighting was Switzerland. And that's where everybody was putting their money, hiding their money. There was. People were escaping to Switzerland to be protected. Look what happened to the Jewish people. How can you forever forget that? God, in Russia, Poland. It was awful. We didn't know about all that stuff. Now you're finding out about it. Who's writing books now? 54 years ago this happened. And it was, a war is an awful, awful thing. It's, do anything to prevent war. Even to apologize to anybody. You cannot, that's awful.
You mentioned earlier the pictures of the boot camp and just now the statistics. Would you like to take, if you would, a minute to show off some of that and maybe explain about the hat a little? Just
You want to show me the picture?
yeah.
Well, this is when we graduated from boot camp. It was in Sampson, New York. Yeah, I don't think you can see this, but I'm the second row, fourth in from the left side here. And that's these are leggings. That's why they call it boot camp. You had it wasn't a boot. It was a legging. It went on over your shoe and you laced it up. And when you graduated, you took those off, and that was just a memory after that. It was all these fellas, I don't know where any of them is. This one guy here was from Rome, but I don't know where he went to. Now, the hat, which hat do you thought, this here?
Yeah.
Well, the American Legion hat, I joined the American Legion when I was on the police department. One of our captains was a World War I veteran. He was a Legionnaire. And anybody who came on the police department was a veteran. He would talk them into joining the Legion, which was, I did. I've been a Legionnaire on my card shows 37 years, but I lost 6 years because I quit there for a while. I got busy doing other things and I never got back in, so altogether it was 43 years. And this is our post 24 years in Rome, Smith Post. And you say, where'd you get the number from? 24, that's the 24th post that was assigned that number when they organized back in World War I. So it's a young, it's an older post. It was one of the newer ones in the state. Because you look at some of the posts, you see 2,400 on that.
Yeah.
The American Legion has a lot of programs going on. And a lot of baseball heroes today in the American League and the National Leagues started in American Legion baseball. So there's a lot of good services. And then they have the auxiliary, then they have sons and daughters of the Legion. So it's a perpetual thing, it's going on. And you young people are going to have to keep it going because, God forbid, we never have another war. So there won't be very many war veterans in there. It'll be just sons and daughters of war veterans. And that's better than having a war veteran for today.
Is there a...
And the statistics you were talking about, I picked this up And that's another thing you people got over us. You can go to a computer and get your www.com and look at this here. The girl down the library yesterday popped that out in 5 minutes. I would have took me 6 months to find out of this here. This is just a list of the allies in the countries, and I'm not going to go through them all, but like I said, every country in the world was at war except Switzerland. And remember, Switzerland is always armed. They have a training program there that all their youth are trained. The use of military weapons and stuff, and they keep them in their houses. Here we're trying to get rid of guns. Over there they have them in every house, and they don't have less crime. So it's not the guns that you got to worry about, it's the people you got to worry about. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And if there's not guns, they'll do something with something else. I don't want to get on that program. But here, just the statistic in the United States, statistic, in World War II now, it's not, we had 16,353,659 people in the military. That's in uniform. Just think how many people were working in war military, in factories, and everybody. Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard of Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
Well, that was the woman went to work, building ships. Songs about it.
Right.
Now, out of that 16 million, C is military killed or missing. The United States had 297,793 killed or missing. And wounded was 671,278. That's just in the United States. And that's not talking about all the people that Germany killed and wiped out, and Russia killed. Can you just imagine, just stop to think for a moment, if you had a computer right there now, that if all those people were killed, if they weren't killed and there wasn't any war, how many of those people would have had families, and how many children would have been perpetuated from all those people? My God, you'd have 100 times more people in the world than you have today. And just think of some of those people who were killed, what kind of ideas they might have brought forward to the world. You know? It's an awful thing that we lost all those people. But that's just one statistic of the United States. Then it goes on, but if you want to get that, this is just for the Allies. They got it on the, I can't read down that far, Tim. Could you see that www what?
Yeah, it's members.aol.com.
Yeah, you go to that program and it'll bring you up all that information. Like I said, you people got the world right by the horns. You got those computers and the internets and AOLs and whatever you call it, all those Microsofts and all of those. My God, the stuff you can find today. I want to find something. You know, I used to run around to the stores. And even our library didn't have any stuff like this, you know, because people didn't write books like they do today. They make a lot of money on books today. They get on IMIS program and boom, the books go up. But you just go to the computer. You find everything. You find addresses. I'm looking, I have a program going on right now for Memorial Day from the Legion. It was my idea. So naturally, when you have an idea and you go to your commander, guess who's the chairman of that idea? You! The program is this. In the Rome, New York, at the military memorial down on North James Street, not the one up to B-52, we have two memorials. The one down on South James Street, the military memorial, my program is we're putting in 6 flagpoles around the monument representing each branch of the service, the Army, the Navy, Marines, the Air Corps, Coast Guard, and the Merchant Marines. So they're going to indicating the service that they gave in World War II. And the biggest surprise came to me last year when we had a young man give us a speech on his service time, like I am to you, but he was in uniform, he's still in service. And he brought out the statistic of the Merchant Marines. I was shocked. The Merchant Marines lost 85% of their personnel killed. 85, is that under the Merchant Marines? In World War II. And when you stop and look at your statistics, they got the ships that the Germans sunk in the North Atlantic. And every ship that went down, mostly they all died because the water was so cold that the survival rate was forget it. It was gone. And on those ships also were Navy personnel, what they call the armed guards, that they had deck guns on there for protection, but not much protection for a torpedo. Is it mentioned in there, the Merchant Marines?
It says that the Merchant Marines are included.
Yeah, they have the Merchant Marines has a big fatality rate in World War II. Big one. More than any other branch of the service, really. 85%. No branch of the service lost 85% of their personnel. They lost 85% of their companies when they went into battle, but not 85 of the Army or the Navy. They lost 85%. So that statistic was from this fella. And when I looked at that, I said, boy, they got to be mentioned somewhere on this memorial. That's when I came up with the idea with the flags for every branch of the service. And this Memorial Day, right presently, the flagpoles are in my driveway. And the flags are all down American Legion. And they're all paid for and waiting to go in the ground. And we have a contractor who's really tight. He's awful busy right now. We're going to dig that out and they got to be set down in cement. See? It's only about a half a day's work, but the thing is to get the stuff down there. And if it's, I think next week, if he can't do it, I think I'm going to get myself and a couple other guys with post hole diggers and, you know, or maybe the city will give us a hand. They ought to. It's their park and we're donating it all. We bought everything. So I think they can come back and help us a little bit. I think they will. Because the mayor's pretty good. He's good for the military.
All right, well,
So that's that on that.
that's about it. Thank you very much for your time.
I got to tell you one other thing before I leave now. I'm a World War II veteran, American Legion member. I'm 75 years of age. I'm still married to my bride, 57 years this November. I have 3 children, 2 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
And I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud to be in Rome. I've lived here all my life. I was born and raised here. And I like the smile on that lady right there.
That's great.
Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure. I was kind of nervous when I come here, but you guys made me feel relaxed.
That's good. I'm Timothy Quick at RFA. Today is May 11th, 2001. Today we will be interviewing Mr. Louis Razzano, who is a U.S. Navy veteran from World War II. He served from 1944 to 1946.